We begin with a decision that will impact the nation for decades to come. Justice Anthony Kennedy announced Wednesday he will retire after 3 decades on the Supreme Court. The 81-year-old was long considered the court's swing vote. In many memorable 5-4 decisions, Kennedy sided with liberals in legalizing gay marriage and refusing to strike down Roe v. Wade. But Kennedy also joined conservatives in striking down a handgun ban and allowing corporations to spend as much as they want on political ads. Here's what President Trump said after he announced his retirement.
He's been a great justice of the Supreme Court. He is a man who is displaying great vision. He's displayed tremendous vision and tremendous heart.
The president is now expected to install a new justice to cement conservative control of the court. Here's chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford.
The president was formally notified in a letter delivered to the White House. After 30 years on the court, Justice Anthony Kennedy would retire.
And we will begin our search for a new justice of the United States Supreme Court that will begin immediately.
A key swing vote. The 81-year-old's retirement gives the president the chance to turn the court more solidly to the right for a generation. Democrats warned of a fight.
People from all across America should realize that their rights and opportunities are threatened.
But firmly in control of the Senate, Republicans said a new justice would be on the court by October.
We will vote to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor this fall.
The bitter divide was in stark contrast to the gentlemanly justice who sometimes crossed ideological lines.
I am today announcing my intention to nominate United States Circuit Judge Anthony Kennedy.
Nominated by President Ronald Reagan,
I, Anthony Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
Kennedy was confirmed unanimously. He sometimes sided with liberals on key social issues, earning him a reputation as a swing vote.
I hate that term. It has this visual image of these spatial gyrations. The cases swing, I don't.
His defining legacy will be gay rights. He wrote all the major decisions striking down laws banning homosexuality and legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide, writing that same-sex couples were seeking equal dignity in the eyes of the law. But far more often, Kennedy was with conservatives. He wrote a sharp dissent in the decision upholding Obamacare. And while he refused to overturn Roe v. Wade, he allowed restrictions on abortion rights.
CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford joins us now from the Supreme Court. Jan, who are you hearing are possible candidates to replace Anthony Kennedy?
Well, I mean, the president has a long list of potential contenders, and he said he's sticking to that list. But there are 3 primary frontrunners. They're all federal appeals court judges: Brett Kavanaugh, Raymond Kethledge, and Amul Thapar. Thapar would actually be the first Indian American on the Supreme Court. The president interviewed him last year when he was looking to replace Justice Scalia. There are 2 others the president interviewed who also could be in the mix. I think they're probably less likely: William Pryor and Thomas Hardiman. But all 5, I mean, they have sterling academic and conservative legal credentials, so this is not going to be a fight over their qualifications.
And Jan, where did this list of possible nominees come from?
Well, the president has worked very closely with Leonard Leo, who is the head of the Federalist Society. It's a conservative legal organization, but also there's been a lot of input from the White House counsel's office, even the Justice Department. So really, he's gotten a lot of advice from some of his conservative legal advisors as they develop this list. And, you know, if you look back, some people kind of were making fun of, like, who would Trump put on the Supreme Court if he got to be president? You know, would it be Judge Judy? This list is a very conventional list of established conservative, mostly federal appeals court judges. It's really not any different than a list you would see if, say, it was a President Romney that we were talking about.
Right. And Jan, it does appear, though, that Washington may be gearing up for a Supreme Court fight over abortion. How would you see that playing out?
Well, Tanya, I mean, we saw that right away today, didn't we? On the Hill and elsewhere. I mean, already that was the focus, abortion rights. And that's because the Democrats are trying to argue that abortion is in the balance. And this fifth vote could really tip the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. But I think you've got to keep in mind there's only one justice on the Supreme Court right now, Clarence Thomas, who said he would overturn Roe versus Wade. We don't know how the other three conservative justices now on the court will vote. And we certainly won't know how the next nominee will vote. Judges never say, or prospective judges never say, how they'll vote on cases that might someday come before them. But you're right. I mean, Democrats already are making this solely a fight over abortion rights. And remember, I mean, two of the liberal justices now will be over 80 years old this year. So this is an issue that will affect future elections for years to come.
And there's a fight gearing up before that point. Jan, Democrats are going to point to Republicans preventing President Obama from appointing Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court seat, which eventually went to Neil Gorsuch, as a turning point for the court. How different would the court look today if it was Garland and not Gorsuch on the bench?
Oh, I mean, the conservatives, the Chief Justice, they would be writing dissenting opinions. I mean, you would have more of a liberal Supreme Court instead of a 5-4 conservative Supreme Court. When Justice Gorsuch replaced the staunch conservative Antonin Scalia, that kept that seat conservative, so it's a 5-4 split. So you could kind of assume in some of these big controversial cases that it would be flipped.
And before Justice Kennedy announced his retirement, the court issued a ruling that will have a major impact on public sector unions. Can you explain that ruling for us?
Sure, and I mean, that's a good example of how the court may have come out differently if Justice Gorsuch had been Justice Garland. This is a big case that will have a tremendous impact on public sector unions in about half the states across the country, where the court ruled that if you're not a member of a public sector union, you cannot force to pay dues out of your paycheck to that union. That they said that just violates all notions of compelled government speech. It violates the First Amendment. So this involved a challenge from a man in Illinois who said he didn't agree with what the union was doing. He didn't want to be a part of it, and he didn't think he should have to pay his dues mandatorily as Illinois law required. And he won today in front of the Supreme Court. I mean, that produced a very impassioned dissent by Justice Elena Kagan, who said that the Supreme Court was really gutting the First Amendment, undermining the rights of workers. But we talked to Mark Janus after the decision, and he told me, he said, this isn't a defeat for workers. It's a victory for workers' freedom, because they can now choose whether they want to be in a union or not.
All right, Jan Crawford at the Supreme Court. Thank you.